Hi Arnaud, thanks for welcoming us into your home, well, into your hangar. Can you explain a bit to us? What is this crazy project? So this project is crazy. It's a former agricultural site that was abandoned for about 15 years. The goal was to turn it into a kind of all-in-one living space with a place to work, live, and raise a family. Because you're a carpenter, right? With training as an architect, that's it. And so here I have all my workspaces with my machine park, my wood stocks and everything. And then after that, we split a large part of the warehouse for personal life with all our outbuildings. And then the house at the back, which is a mixed house with a contemporary hut of 65 square meters. For the living area, which extends onto a turquoise extension for the sleeping area, which is about the same size. Oh yes, you don't expect it to be this big. When you hear yurt, you think light dwelling, it's small, but here it's not. That's what makes the difference between a contemporary yurt and a traditional Mongolian yurt. It's mainly the size, because here we have 9 meters 15 in diameter, whereas a Mongolian yurt is at most around 6 meters in diameter. This type of yurt, which is widely sold in North America, there are quite a few people who set them up with a mezzanine even inside for a storage area. Could be in the evening, but you didn't want to do that, to have a mezzanine, or you really want to keep the cathedral-like feel. Yeah, so for us, the initial goal was to have this cathedral ceiling. I've been eating breakfast every morning for 7 years while staring at my ceiling, and I don't think I'll ever get tired of it. So the famous tonu is the central piece of the yurt. Traditionally, among the Mongols, it's made with fabric. The wood stove in the center heats the entire room. And then the smoke is vented out through this part. And on contemporary yurts, it has been turned into a kind of Velux dome, which is mounted on a jack that I can open if I want to air out the place. If you have fun opening this wide and opening a door to let the air run through, you get a huge draft, and you can air out your house in no time at all. You can really feel the suction between the hot and cold air and how they mix. And in the summer, does it help you air out the house or not at all? Well, you can air it out, but not me. In the summer, we do something else. I made a kind of rigid circular curtain that I clip on at the top in the summer to block some of the glare. But in the off-season and winter, it's really nice. It introduces a noteworthy light source. And it wasn't too complicated to set up since everything is round. It raises new questions. As a woodworking professional, I loved it because it was a technical challenge, which was really interesting. If it was complicated, it wasn't about shaping the different spaces, but rather about finding the right places to put up partitions to create the spaces. It took a bit of thought, but it worked out well. Here we can see that your training as an interior architect really helped you better understand how to arrange the space. Yes, and then I spent hours drawing and designing. Actually, the challenge is that since the walls are rounded and we have a lot of windows, I tried to make the best use of the wall sections that were left empty. So here, for example, I tried to make a bookshelf using the basic structure of the yurt. But we're always having to calculate, it's not always very simple. And then, are you forced to put all the furniture in the center of the room? Nothing against the walls, right? You think about the layout differently, that's it. And once again, it's this circular aspect that kind of guides things. The way you want, you're going to live in the yurt, and how you will, what did you plant? So, it's not always easy once you've figured out a few tricks to save space. It's going well, so here we get to the part where he has a much more classic setup compared to the yurt.
Of course.
I went with the hallway that connects all the rooms in a row, so the toilet, bathroom, my oldest son's room, my daughter's room, and then my own room. At the end, this allows us to have pretty interesting living spaces because we have rooms that are around 14 square meters, so I'll show you that. So it's because we have a sleeping area of 65 square meters that we managed to have such large bedrooms, and in the annex area. So you did everything in wood and also wanted, I see, to keep this oriented strand board aesthetic. Yeah, because I liked that look a little bit, a buzz vibe that I didn't mind. And what was especially essential for both of us about the bedrooms was to have a lot of light. We wanted very bright bedrooms, so all the bedrooms have large picture windows, 2 meters by 1 meter 40. Ninon's bedroom has a beam and a post, unlike the other rooms.
Structural support.
The shed is at its structural limit, with the new addition integrated into the shed's framework. Actually, the wooden framework was placed right up against one of the shed's load-bearing walls. And right behind this oriented strand board, there's actually the masonry of the shed. And then, after the exterior cladding, yes, from outside you can clearly see that you have the shed and that you have the wooden annex, which is blended with the shed. And here, you had to make an opening for the yurt, right? Absolutely, yeah. Actually, the shed was completely closed off. There was just the entrance door that we came through earlier. So I demolished all of that, so the concrete foundation, and then after that, I put up wooden cladding on top, behind which we installed rods. And we put up curtains in the summer to close off the shed, and blackout curtains for the sun, okay, for nothing. To have some protection from the heat, what was the benefit of placing the yurt under the shed instead of on the grass on your property? It's that you had the concrete slab mainly, which allowed us to have a more stable base. The pre-existing leveled agricultural slab spans over 1,000 square meters, providing a perfectly even surface. Everywhere, there's not the slightest bump. And then it was also a way to protect ourselves a bit from people's view. So it's true that we're in the middle of the countryside, but we want to have a bit of privacy there at the end of the barn, and so that you can't necessarily see the yurt from the street. Everything in your project is unusual, from the barn and yurt to the wooden annex. It's all out of the ordinary. Why this project? So why this project? Above all, it's a personal challenge, actually. I tried to bring together in the creation of this living space all my skills and a good part of my wild ideas. Me, I don't have to smile all the time, thank you, but yeah. It was a way for me to prove myself a little, to put into practice everything I had learned, everything I had been able to do for others. And for me, the days, that's what it takes. It's always fascinated me for years and years. But it's true that, as we were saying earlier, the structure and configuration of the Mongolian yurt wasn't necessarily what I wanted. And one day, little by little, just browsing around on the internet, I discovered the concept of the contemporary yurt, and that was absolute love at first sight, so we focused on that. So, and the appeal of the yurt goes beyond just aesthetics. Was it also because it's an ecological project? Well, yes and no, meaning yes, it is an ecological project. Because we live more in harmony with nature, especially through the interaction between the inside and the outside. But then it's not necessarily ecological because, well, as we've seen, a contemporary yurt is made with plastic materials, modern insulation and all that. And obviously those aren't the healthiest things to produce. If the ambition of this project at the start wasn't necessarily for it to be ecological, even if it was in some ways, was it economical, more economical than a traditional house? Well, yes and no. If we do a straightforward ratio calculation, square meter, yes, because here we're in a living space, we use the square meter, the view covers 1 square meter. We have 140 square meters of living space, 200 square meters of outbuildings, and I have 600 square meters of inner courtyard, storage space and everything. So indeed the square meter ratio is unbeatable. Then, when you look at the amount I invested, it's about the same budget as someone who would have bought a nice piece of land with a beautiful house on it. And maybe it was also quite economical to do this project, because you were able to do a lot of it by self-building, so everything was done by self-building, except for the shed, so the shed was already there. It dates back to 1995, so I worked about 85% of it by myself. I got a helping hand from some very, very close friends on certain interior fittings, some structural elements, and above all, a big helping hand from family and friends when assembling the yurt. So, as you were saying, it's a kit. So, we contacted a company in the United States, and who? We entrusted our project to them. With the mother of my children, we designed the yurt, we created it, and then we submitted it to them, and they built it. They sent us the house by container, so we had 3 big boxes that arrived here and there. The day you take them out of the truck, you say, well, there was a house in there, so there you go. Then we called on friends and family. And then, except for the platform, which was built in advance, that I had to make ahead of time. We assembled the structure of the yurt in 72 hours, 72. We did it on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We started Friday morning, and by Sunday evening, the yurt was finished. Can you go back, maybe explain it to us a bit in order? At the beginning, we start with a concrete slab, and then in the end, we have a yurt. Those are the different steps. So, battle concrete, so existing ones, which we drilled in certain places to run the pipes, water supply, and wastewater. Then on this concrete slab, I had to create a sort of pie-shaped mini crawl space that accommodates the yurt. So I built a wooden structure with a giant compass to make an outer ring. I added reinforcements inside, ran water and electricity, installed insulation, and then OS. We wanted a wooden floor inside, a self-supporting one with very few joists. We needed someone to handle that. So it's supported every 2 meters. And so we have a floor that's 60 millimeters thick, which I had custom made and installed myself. So here you see this is the center of the yurt actually, and it's from this hole that I was able to lay out the whole house. So actually I made a giant compass that allowed me to trace the entire perimeter of the yurt to get the right positioning for the kit. And then afterwards I ended up with this hole right in the middle of the house, and I wondered how I was going to cover it up. And by doing some research on the internet and in some books, I found out that traditionally among the Mongols, they put a coin in the center of their yurt. It's a sign of good omens and happiness. So I did the same, and I chose a bronze coin by Georges Mathieu, the old 10 franc coin, which represents France, and I placed them as best as I could. And then, so the tower, you built it pretty quickly, and in the end you just followed the plans without inventing anything specific, and then you moved on to the wooden annex. So I did, we put it there, the yurt was weatherproof, then I worked inside it again for about 2 to 2.5 months. It's completely finished. So, finishing the kitchen, the television area, finishing the lakes, finishing the plumbing, the office area, the storage spaces and all that, because the goal was still to be able to move into the house faster. So having this part already finished, and then after that continuing to be inside, and then continuing to work on the rest of it. At night, you know, all the outbuildings, the yurt and the rest of it, but we're looking at 10 months of work. Okay, so, and how long did it take before you were able to live in it? Well, we had to move in around the 7th month, something like that. Outside. You were telling me that the yurt house solution wasn't necessarily an economical project. It wasn't more economical than other types of housing. I'd like us to go back to that a bit and for you to tell us in more detail how much this project cost you. So, yeah, no, it's not more economical than a traditional house. That's what I was explaining earlier. Basically, for the price of a traditional house, you get a different lifestyle and a slightly bigger playground. So for us, overall, the project cost us 190,000 euros. So you should know that you have to subtract 100,000 euros for the purchase of the existing hangar and 1 hectare of land. So that's it. That was the initial investment to create the project. After that, we spent 90,000 euros on creating the living space, so the yurt plus the sleeping area. And also setting up all the outbuildings and workshops for work and for storing our personal belongings. And if we go into more detail about the yurt itself than us, at the time, so in 2016, 2017, we paid 38,000 euros to move here. To give you an idea, I'm currently thinking about another yurt project with about the same size yurt, roughly the same setup. And now we're more around 46,000. And how much more do you add? For the wooden slab, you have to count around, well, at the time it was 3,000 euros. But now, given the increase in the price of wood, and knowing that we're still dealing with custom-made self-supporting parquet floors, we'd be looking at 5,000 euros. Okay, so basically today, if you had to buy a contemporary yurt and set it up yourself, it's around 50,000 for a 65 square meter space with additional renovations still needed. You have your interior partitioning. If you wanted to make a mezzanine with a bedroom upstairs, for example, and a living room downstairs, bathroom, we could have a turnkey project for 62,000 euros. There, we think it's not expensive, it's nice, but it stays in our minds. A lightweight dwelling, for example, maybe in terms of insulation, what do you think about the insulation of a contemporary yurt? The company we worked with is a company that had the opportunity to buy patents from National Aeronautics and Space Administration for certain insulators that were used in aeronautics. Initially, I was amazed by the energy capacity numbers, which seemed unbelievable. Well then, I hadn't noticed. It was in square feet, not square meters, so the calculation wasn't exactly the same. But after converting and studying the elements, I realized that it comes out to about the standards of an average house, meaning the equivalent of 200 to 250 of fiberglass in the ceiling and 160 in the walls. Basically, RT 2012, yeah, we're at an RT 2012 level, not at an RT 2020 level. I don't think so, because the standards have gotten a lot stricter. Just so you know though, we're talking about the night area here. Coming from a more traditional wooden frame here, we're not far from the RT 2020 standard. So how comfortable is a yurt in terms of temperature? We mentioned it was only insulated to 2012 standards. But is it the same comfort as in a regular house? Are there things that are different? Well, yes, we have the same comfort as in a regular house. Then people say, well, that's strange. It seems light, so do they get cold in the winter or hot in the summer? Actually, in the winter, if the house isn't lived in, the temperature can drop very low. On the other hand, the advantage is that as soon as you light the stove, 45 minutes later, it's 21 degrees in the house. So that's what's really great. There's no residual heat after heating, but when you need to raise the temperature, it goes up very quickly. Then the issue is a bit more in the summer because it's the opposite of this process. That is, once the heat gets into the house, it's harder for it to get out. So that's also why I set up a giant curtain system in the window to block the sun during the hottest hours in summer on the house. And do you have an idea of how much it costs you in electricity and heating to prepare? So for pellets, I bring in my pellets. At first I bought them as needed, now I buy them all at once. I spend 650 euros for pellets. So there you go, parents. In the end it's for 65 square meters. Yes, for 65 square meters here. Then a little bit of residual heat that will go a bit into the bathroom, and then we say 65 square meters. But considering the ceiling height, you do lose some space, as 400 cubic meters is quite substantial. So there you go. And then for electricity, well, I'm going to give a number that's a bit skewed because there's domestic consumption, there's heating, and there's also, for me, my workshop consumption. I don't have any high-power three-phase machines, but we're working from a baseline. My monthly electricity bill, all-inclusive, is around 100 euros. You were saying that you were working on a new yurt project. That's exactly the question. If you had to do it again, what would you do differently? Actually, if you had to do it again, what would you do differently? If I were to do a yurt project again, it would be to make what I call the ultimate yurt. What's the ultimate yurt? The ultimate yurt. Well, first of all, like you just said, it's about correcting any little mistakes I made. It would be pretentious to say I did an unusual architectural project without any mistakes. While I didn't make too many, that's not entirely true, knock on wood. But there are things that can be improved. The big difference would be that for me, the ultimate yurt would be to put it on a sloping piece of land with a panoramic view and build a panoramic platform terrace and put the yurt on top of it. Was it difficult to get the yurt approved by the town halls, either here or in your other searches? It wasn't complicated here. The mayor was very attentive to our projects from the beginning. First of all, we try to do things smartly, and that's a piece of advice I can give to anyone who wants to live in a light dwelling. You shouldn't come in fourth. You shouldn't try to force fate. Afterwards, I was looking at some land to start a new yurt project somewhere else. And honestly, several towns just slammed the door in my face. But yeah, you have to be. These are projects where you really have to be highly motivated and you can't be afraid to face the administrative machine. So that's always a little bit the downside. Unusual types of housing, but well, since you're talking about unusual houses, you were saying people often have the wrong idea about how isolated it is, about is it sustainable over time? Is it possible to resell this kind of project? Or are people too fearful and nobody wants to buy? Do the prices collapse compared to what you invested? Listen, I'll tell you soon. I've put the site up for sale and I'm in the middle of the process. First of all, it was complicated to find real estate agencies that were able to take this property for sale. I contacted experts specializing in typical properties. And then we'll see. And in terms of estimation for now, compared to the 190,000 you said you put in total for everything, would you still be able to resell for more, or would you lose out and resell for less? No, I would still resell for more. But then on paper, making them understand that it's not just do it yourself, that it's not. It's more complicated. I think that culturally in France, we're not ready yet for this kind of house, and I hope we'll get there. Because I remain convinced that from an architectural point of view, it's a solution for people to find housing. France is facing a significant housing shortage and a real housing problem. But people, ideologically, are not ready yet, and also, we are not really given the means to settle as we want.